Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel, Complicated Relationships. Hope you guys are safe and healthy, and it's time we listen to today's story.
I never imagined my life would come to this. I had always believed in love, in trust, in the sanctity of marriage. Doris and I had been together for 8 years and married for 5. She was my world, the woman I had promised to cherish and protect. But that promise meant nothing when the one you vowed to protect is the very person who drives the knife into your back. It all started with small things that didn't quite add up. Late nights at work, sudden changes in her routine, the way she started locking her phone. I had my suspicions, but I pushed them aside. I loved her, and love meant trust, right? Love meant giving her the benefit of the doubt, but doubt has a way of creeping in, no matter how hard you try to push it away. And that doubt turned into certainty on a night I will never forget. I had been out with some colleagues, a casual night out, nothing extravagant. I hadn't even planned on coming home early, but something told me to go back. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was my subconscious putting the puzzle pieces together before I was willing to see the full picture. When I stepped into my house, something felt off. The lights were dimmed, and there was a faint scent in the air, a scent I recognized all too well. It was the perfume Doris only wore on special occasions, the one I had bought her on our honeymoon. I walked up the stairs, my heart pounding against my ribs, an unexplainable rage and fear bubbling inside me. And then I heard it. Voices, laughter, moans, the unmistakable sounds of betrayal. I pushed the bedroom door open, and there they were, Doris and my childhood friend, Ethan. Ethan, the guy I had grown up with, the one who had been there through every milestone of my life. My best friend. My brother is in everything but blood. They froze, their bodies tangled in the sheets of my bed, the bed Doris and I had shared for years. For a second, none of us moved. The air was thick with silence, with shock, with something I couldn't quite name. Then Ethan scrambled, grabbing his clothes and muttering something incoherent. "Get the hell out," I growled, my fists clenching so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. Ethan stammered, his eyes wide, his face red with shame. "Man, I said, get the hell out," I roared, taking a step closer. I was barely holding myself back. If he didn't leave, I would tear him apart with my bare hands. He bolted, barely managing to pull his pants up as he rushed past me. I turned to Doris, who was now sitting up in bed, the sheet wrapped around her as if she could hide from what she had done. "Please," she whispered, tears already streaming down her face. "Please, let me explain." "Explain?" I laughed bitterly. "Explain what, Doris? That you've been my best friend in my own house? In my own bed?" She fell to her knees, the sheet slipping from her shoulders as she sobbed. "It was a mistake. I swear it meant nothing. Please don't do this. We can fix this." "Fix this? How could you fix something that was so thoroughly broken?" My heart felt like it had been ripped from my chest, trampled on, discarded like... It was nothing. The woman I loved, the woman I had given everything to, had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain composed. "Get up," I said coldly. "Get dressed." She shook her head, her hands clutching at my pants, her body trembling as she clung to me. "Please, I love you. I made a mistake. Don't throw everything away because of one night." "One night?" I scoffed. "Do you really think I believe this was just one night? How long, Doris? How long have you been doing this behind my back?" She flinched but didn't answer, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. I stepped back, breaking, her grip on me. "I'm calling your parents. You're leaving tonight." Her eyes widened in horror. "No, please! Let's talk about this. Don't bring them into this. They should know what kind of daughter they raised, I said coldly as I picked up my phone. Her sobs grew louder, but I ignored them. I dialed her father's number, and when he picked up, I simply said, "Come get your daughter. She won't be staying here anymore." There was silence on the other end, then a heavy sigh. "We'll be there soon." When I hung up, I looked back at Doris. "Pack your things." She didn't move at first, as if hoping I would change my mind. But when she saw the resolve in my eyes, she slowly stood up, her entire body shaking. Minutes later, her parents arrived. Her mother cried when she saw her, but her father simply shook his head in disappointment. They took her away without another word to me, and as the door shut behind them, a strange sense of relief washed over me. The next morning, I went straight to my lawyer and filed for divorce. There was no salvaging this. No amount of apologies could undo what had been done. For weeks, Doris tried to reach out. Texts, calls, even letters. She sent mutual friends to speak on her behalf, but I wanted none of it. I refused to listen to her explanations, to her desperate attempts to repair what she had shattered beyond repair. I took some time to reflect. I moved out of that house, the house where my memories had been poisoned. I started focusing on myself, on rebuilding, on healing. Betrayal is a wound that never truly heals, but it teaches you a lesson. It hardens you and sharpens your instincts. Months passed, and I realized that I was finally free. Free from lies, from deception, from a love that had long since died. Doris had destroyed everything we had, but she hadn't destroyed me. I rebuilt my life from the ground up. I focused on my career, threw myself into my work, and picked up hobbies I had long neglected. I traveled, met new people, and slowly, piece by piece, I put myself back together. One day I ran into Ethan at a coffee shop. He looked different, worn, and regretful. He tried to apologize, but I walked past him without a word. He was nothing to me now, and as I stepped out into the sunlight, I realized that for the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive. I had been broken, but I had healed. And that was enough. Years later, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Doris had remarried. I felt nothing, no pain, no resentment, just indifference. That was how I knew I had truly moved on. I met someone new, someone who reminded me what love was supposed to feel like. We took our time, and for the first time, I felt like I could trust again. Life had a strange way of working out. Betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but it had also reshaped me into someone stronger. I was no longer a victim, I was a survivor, and I was finally happy.
Hope you guys enjoyed the story. We have another story coming up next, but before that, if you liked what you heard so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.
Betrayal has a way of unraveling lives in ways no one anticipates. This story is a raw and unfiltered look at the consequences of infidelity, where fleeting moments of recklessness lead to irreversible damage. It highlights the weight of trust, the pain of loss, and the cruel finality of choices that cannot be undone. Each character's downfall serves as a stark reminder that some mistakes cost more than just a relationship. They cost a future. I'm Jen. We've been dating for about a year. He is the love of my life, but I know I've lost him forever. Mark and I met through some mutual friends who meet about 3 times a month for things like clubbing, gaming, etc., etc. From the first time I saw him, I fell in love with him. We talked for some time that day and started messaging about normal stuff. Our early conversations didn't go any further than that. Eventually, he asked me out on a date. I was over the moon. On the first few dates, he didn't make any moves on me. We just gave each other friendly hugs, and by the 6th date, he gave me a quick peck on the neck. Finally, after 7 dates spread out over 6 weeks, we were intimate. It was a truly glorious experience. It's by far the most fulfilling I ever had. As I said, I fell in love with him at first sight. I immediately stopped dating other guys, and since then, Mark and I have spent every evening together. Our chemistry was excellent. I know a lot of this was due to it being new, but this was different. I've told him countless times that I love him, but he has never said it back. I think he just wanted to remain just friends and not jump in deeper too quickly. Now let me tell you what happened 3 weeks ago. This is when I messed up my entire life. My bestie Susie and her sister Dally invited me to a girls' weekend at a beach villa. Susie rented it to celebrate Dally's 25th milestone. With them, there were 10 of Dally's friends from her area. At first, I had no interest in going because I didn't want to be away from Mark, but eventually, with his permission, I decided to go. I met Mark in his apartment, and we spent quality time together before I left for the villa. All of us met up at the villa, and in the night went out to dinner. We had a great time just talking and laughing all night. When we got back to the villa, we were all very tired and just went to bed. The following morning, we arranged a great breakfast, drank wine, talked, and laughed. We then spent the rest of the day at the beach, soaking in the sun. There, we met a group of boys who were renting a villa near to where we were staying. We all just chatted throughout, and we told them we were there to celebrate Dally's birthday. That same night, all the ladies went out to another pub to continue Dally's birthday. Everything was going smoothly. However, Dally, Susie, and I got a little drunk. By the time we got back to the villa, it was around midnight. While we were sitting around decompressing, there was a knock at the door. We were terrified, thinking, who could it be at that hour? Dally looked out and said it was those guys, the guys they met that afternoon at the beach. They had 2 bottles of champagne. They said they came to wish Dally a happy birthday. We all said not to let them in, but Susie already did. Even though we were all tired from being in the sun all day, we accepted their offer. It was the dumbest mistake. Our other 2 girls looked uncomfortable by this and went up to bed. Dally told her it was okay. Looking back, I wish we would have listened. All of us drank all the champagne and eventually paired off with the guys in separate bedrooms. When I woke up in the morning, the guy was still sleeping beside me. He looked ugly. I felt disgusted, so I walked down the hall to use the bathroom. On the way, I peeked in both Susie's and Dally's rooms, and they were sleeping with the guys they spent the night with. I then noticed the doors to the other 2 girls' rooms were open. When I looked inside, the beds were made. I then looked outside and saw their cars were gone. I then went into Dally's and told her that her friends left. Hearing this, she sprang out of bed and went into panic mode. She called and texted them, but they didn't answer. She then started crying and woke up the guy beside her and told him he needed to leave. She then ran into Susie's room, woke her up, and kicked that guy out as well. By this time, the guy I was with heard the shouting match and came out half naked. Dally told the guys last night was a big mistake, and they all needed to get the hell out. The guys had a stunned look on their faces and headed down the stairs. As we started walking down the steps, there was a loud knock at the door, and a guy's voice was shouting to open up. Dally said, "Oh my God, it's my husband," and started crying. The guys looked fearful. Susie directed them to the back door and let them out that way. Once outside, they started running across the backyard. Dally's husband saw them and started yelling at them, walking towards the back of the cabin. Thankfully, he didn't pursue them. He then came in the back door and just started yelling. It was an ugly and scary situation. I've never seen anyone so angry. He called Dally the most vile names you can imagine. He eventually left the cabin. Dally grabbed her keys and ran out the door to follow her husband. Susie and I were left there alone, stunned at what just happened. It was obvious that the other 2 girls went straight home and told Dally's husband about what went on that night. Susie and I decided to stay for a few more hours to clean up the place so she wouldn't get charged, and thought about what we were going to tell our boyfriends. Oh boy, they're going to find out. How do we spin this? Susie called Dally, and eventually, she answered. Dally was crying. so they didn't talk long. Dally told her that Richard locked her out of the house and told her he wanted a divorce. She was at her parents' house. Susie hung up the phone. She started crying. I knew she felt terrible as renting the villa was all her idea. Susie and I left the cabin just before noon and headed back to town in our own cars. About 20 minutes into the drive, Susie called me and frantically said that her boyfriend called her and broke up with her. He didn't want an explanation. He knew everything, and that they were done. Dally's husband told him all about what had happened. Hearing this, I felt terrible for Susie. She and her boyfriend lived together and were planning on getting married in about a year. While the whole situation with Susie and Dally was awful, my main concern was Mark and what I would say to him if he already found out. If Susie's boyfriend knew, then he probably already told Mark or would be telling him very soon, as they had become good friends. I then decided to just call Mark to feel him out, but he didn't answer, so I texted him, and still nothing. I drove over to his apartment, but he wasn't there. I expected the worst at that point, and I was right. Around 1 o'clock, Mark called me and asked how I was doing. I told him fine. He asked me if I was still at the cabin, and I told him no, that we cut the trip short. He then asked if we had a good time. I hesitated to answer, then started rambling. Mark interrupted me and asked if I enjoyed the big D I got last night. I was caught off guard and couldn't think of anything to say, so I just started apologizing and started crying, saying I was sorry. He interrupted me again and said not to apologize. He said I could do whatever I wanted. At first I thought he was sincere, but realized he was just being sarcastic. He just started laughing. I then asked him if we were through, and he said yes. I realized what I said didn't make sense, but he didn't have to be so cruel. He said we were back to being like we were before we started dating, just casual acquaintance. I told him I didn't want that. I wanted us. He again just laughed and told me to stop, that I was sounding so ridiculous. I then asked him if I would be seeing him that night as we planned, and he said no. He told me he'd be sending the stuff I kept at his apartment back to me and to just throw out the stuff he had at my place as he didn't want it back. He was done with me. This all happened exactly 3 weeks ago today, and I am broken. I pleaded with him through and asked him to give me another chance, but said he was done. I miss him so much. I saw him out at the grocery store last evening, and we spoke briefly. He treated me distantly. In extent of our conversation, he asked me how I was doing. I said terrible, and he told me things would get better and said he had to go. He seems to be unaffected by the whole thing and has moved on, while I'm a broken mess. I'm willing to do anything, including just being in an FWB relationship for him, but I don't think he'd go for that. Dally and her family are no longer speaking with Susie and I. They blame Susie for everything because it was her idea to rent the villa. Last I heard, her husband had filed for divorce and they had put their house up for sale. From what I understand, Dally has never gone back to her home as the other two girls have made sure everyone in that neighborhood knows their business. As for Susie, she's still living with her boyfriend, but they are no longer a couple. They are now just roommates, and he made her sign onto the remaining months of the lease to keep living there. She's now paying half the rent and utilities, whereas before she was just buying their groceries. Weeks later. As I sit here reflecting, I realize that no amount of regret can undo what has already been done. Mark is gone, and I have to come to terms with that. For the first time in a long while, I have to face myself and accept the consequences. The pain of losing him has been unbearable, but I know I can't dwell in this forever. I need to learn from my mistakes. I need to grow. My love for Mark was real, but my choices proved I wasn't ready for the kind of commitment he deserved. Susie and I still talk, but things between us have changed. The weight of what happened hangs over our friendship like a dark cloud. She is trying to move on, just as I am. Dally, however, has cut all ties with us. Her marriage is over, and she is dealing with the aftermath in her own way. I've started seeing a therapist to help me process everything. I need to understand why I allowed myself to throw away something so precious over a single night of bad decisions. It's not just about Mark anymore. It's about me, my values, and the kind of person I want to be. As for Mark, I have accepted that he has moved on. Seeing him in the grocery store was painful, but it also gave me closure. He no longer sees me as someone important in his life, and I have to respect that. I will always love him, but I won't chase after someone who no longer wants me. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing. I will not let this mistake define me. I will learn from it, I will grow, and maybe someday I will find love again, a love that I am mature enough to cherish and protect.
Thank you all for listening. Please like, comment and share the video if you enjoyed it. Also, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you will be notified when we upload the next video. Take care.